and gentlemen, welcome to a special on-location edition of Gran Turisbros. I am Tristan Roadbeef Bayless. I am joined with two very special guests.
Nick McMillen,
also known as
GumballCGT,
as well as
Armen, and I'm also known as TRC Stagger.
Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me. This is just a general debrief of the Austria World Tour at Red Bull Hangar 7, September 2019. Quite an event, wasn't it? Did you gentlemen enjoy yourselves?
Absolutely. I thought being here for the first time in Salzburg was pretty neat. Beautiful city, lots of history here, and the Red Bull Hangar was pretty impressive. That was a really cool venue, I think, for all of us. Armen, what did you think?
Well, it's really my first time doing anything with Gran Turismo outside of New York, so I think it was awesome. No, it really was. It was a gorgeous city. And they also, one thing that they did that they don't usually do is they gave us an extra day to just go roam around the city. Yeah. So we had some off time to go have some fun.
Yeah, that was today. That was awesome. Yeah. We got to go up view a castle, got some ridiculous pictures in. We got to see, I think it was the Eagle's Nest from a distance, which was a Third Reich hangout. That was quite something.
We got to see Mozart's birthplace.
We had some Wiener Schnitzel.
Yes, had to get the schnitzel. That was my number one goal. I was here.
We rounded off our day with a beautiful dinner with Kaz, the whole PD team, all the competitors. The beer was flowing. The food was delicious. It was representative of how the whole weekend went in general.
Yeah.
So getting to the competition, we had manufacturers first on Friday. We had nations on Saturday. I was particularly struck with the, in comparison to New York City, although that was a well-produced event, the sportsmanship was perhaps a little lacking for a few notable incidents, but here in Salzburg, it was very clean. I was particularly surprised at the start of the second manufacturers race at Spa. La Source is always an incident, Grosjean running into Hamilton, Alonso, like incidents left, right, and center. I don't think anyone hit anyone or went off track. That was something that could only have happened through the restraint of all competitors, and that is a result, I think, of a kind of a newfound respect. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. I was surprised at how clean everyone was. There were a few incidents, a couple of mistakes, but there's not really any incident that stands out as something that was over the top or blatant. It seemed much cleaner. But Kazunori also kind of made a point in our driver briefing that we kind of need to pay a little bit more attention and maybe not do some things that have been done in the past. Some notable incidents. I think everyone was on their best behavior here, which made it a little bit more mellow. The good racing was really good. Everything was toned down a little bit, which I don't know if I liked more or less. I haven't decided yet.
Debatable if the excitement level was much less, or if perhaps the excitement level was the same, but the stories were just different. What do you think, Armen?
I do agree. Being part of the race, I think it was it was still as exciting being a competitor, but I wonder as a viewer if you're going to be as invested into one of the competitors if you're not seeing them do big moves and risk it all. But overall, I think the stewards were a lot more active. We saw a lot more investigations being done on some of the moves or contacts during the race. So I think that kept everybody a little bit more calm. But everything was displayed on the screen as soon as there was any contact. I think everybody was aware of it, and so people pulled back maybe 10 to 20% during the race. So it was good as a competitor, but again, as viewership, I don't know if that's going to gain us or lose us some viewers.
There were some penalties levied during the weekends, and it seemed as though the penalties met the crime. Would you say that was true?
100%. I agree with that, and I was very happy with that, actually. I think the penalties that were given out were extremely fair, and there was some question when there was questionable moves. If a car lost a couple positions, that was part of the questionable move. I think he was not awarded a penalty because, well, he got what he deserved in return. So,
I thought it was really fair, which is good to see. I know Wolfgang Rieb is very much into making sure that it's fair. I like having been teammates and learned kind of how he is. He wants things to be right. He wants things to be fair, and he wants to kind of, I think, be efficient about things as well. And he's been very good at listening to all of us and kind of what we want and what we expect. And again, from his real racing background, he is treating these FIA competitions as if he were competing in an FIA competition, as if he was in Blancpain or something and an incident happened. There were multiple questions that came up, and he was clear to say that don't treat this like a game. Just because you can get away with it in the game doesn't mean that I'm not going to penalize you for it, because that's what would happen in real life. So I respect him for that, and I think that's what we needed. And I thought it was a huge improvement kind of over what we've been seeing, and the response time to incidents was almost immediate, which was fantastic. So I know Mikhail's incident with Igor, there were multiple things said, done, and things took time with that, and I think that kind of ruined part of the race or the motivation between some of the drivers at the last round. So I think it was good this time around. I think it was a good improvement.
Cool, thank you. Another topic of intense discussion, at least in the YouTube chats, has been with regards to the format of the Manufacturer Series. We've gone from a 3-race with a grand final, where each teammate has their own race by themselves, and then a final race where the 3 of them have driver changes, to 2 races of equal length, thereabouts, with 2 sets of driver changes. And it resulted in what might be considered by some as an unfair allocation of time spent on track by a couple of competitors for the sake of sacrificing for a superior strategy. Since these races required, at least the second race, a use of the soft, the medium, and the hard tires, it turned out rather quickly that the optimum strategy was to have a minimum amount of time spent on the hard tires. And as many people have pointed out, several competitors flew thousands of miles and many hours to do 1 or 2 laps on track. Now, that does not diminish their contribution to the success of their team, certainly not, but in another way can be viewed as unfair. And I am wondering what your thoughts are on this, Armen.
I think we all we do what's what. At least my team, we did what's best for our team. So if we have to go out there and do 1 lap, I think that's fair. Whether you've flown out so many hours to get here, I think we all want the success of the team, right? At the end of the day, though, really, I think there should be rules against that, where you can just go and do an out and in. What we're trying to accomplish with this, I think, is a bit of realism to kind of simulate what real life would be, with driver swaps and different compounds. And I don't think it's really realistic to just go out there and do 1 lap and come in. But if there's any loopholes, that we try to take advantage of. So it was a real disadvantage to be on the hard tires. So the shortest stint was on the hard tire. I think the best way to control this is maybe to decrease the gap between the tires in terms of speed, or maybe set some standards in terms of how many laps you can do per tire before you come in. Like
a minimum number of laps.
A minimum number, yeah, at least for the hards.
Or a minimum drive time.
Yeah.
That's something that's set in some of the racing I've done, where Blancpain, for example, we're going to say a 3-hour race, 3 drivers. Obviously it's more condensed version, but each driver has to participate at least 45 minutes in a stint. I think that's completely fair to say that a driver has to do so much of a percentage of a race. If you're talking about a 10-lap race, we'll call it, say it's at Nürburgring, if you have 1 driver do 1 lap, they've done 10%, and then everybody else, gets 3-4 times as many, laps in, essentially. So I think that's hard for some. I mean, obviously, like Armen said, we want to do what's best for our team because we want to win. And sometimes that can be an advantage if you have a stronger driver and a weaker driver and someone in the middle, where you can leverage those strengths and weaknesses to help your team win. But at the same time, I'm sure none of us, want to go out and do 1 lap at Spa and, call it a day. So, I think a minimum drive time would be beneficial. And I absolutely agree with Armen that kind of bridging the gap between, how fast a hard tire is versus soft. I mean, we were talking 3, 4, 5 seconds a lap,
Pretty significant.
depending on the car, which is very, very significant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be really helpful to bring those closer together, where maybe there's only a 2-second discrepancy between hard, medium, soft, as opposed to this 5-6 seconds that we're seeing depending on the track. So
Totally.
yeah, I think that would be really beneficial driver time, and fixing kind of the tire situation too.
So building upon the suggestions that I think all three of us agree upon with regards to minimum driver time, it would seem if that were to be implemented, we may then want to suggest a longer race in general. Because then if you have a minimum driver time of say like 4 laps per tire and it's only a 17-lap race, then there's that just simply reduces the amount of time that a faster tire can't even give an advantage. Would you think that a longer race would be a good idea for future world tours, or are we at the right length for the broadcast and keeping people's attention?
Actually, that's a great point that I kind of wanted to make or bring up. I think people love seeing the sprint races because there's a little bit of havoc that goes on. People are really fighting for position because they want to try and get to the front as quickly as possible and run away with it. Whereas sometimes, if you're watching this, you want to see that. That's the excitement. You want to see crashes. You want to see bumping. You want to see these mistakes. Obviously as part of the entertainment. You don't want to see someone run away with it. So I think the shorter races, kind of group the fields together, which is great for the viewer standpoint. As a driver, I do enjoy the longer races, though, I have to say. But, it's hard. Typically, the longer the race, the bigger the gap someone can build. And then if everyone spreads out, you don't have racing. So I think it's hard to call. I think format-wise, I actually really enjoyed the 3 single races and the 1 big team race. I think that really allows each driver to prove themselves on track. It allows each driver to at least get X amount of drive time for each person, and then the team race, you work together to do that. So whereas this one, some people I saw, they kind of got the short end of the stick. They didn't get much drive time because maybe they're not as quick, or the tire strategy, etc. So I don't know. It's a tough call. I like both formats, but I have to say that this 3 sprint format, 1 endurance is kind of my pick. I don't know about either of you two, if you agree.
I agree with you 100%. I think the shorter the races, the more excitement you get out of it. If it's a long race and you're seeing somebody on soft tires just running away with it, whereas the second place guy is on hard tires and just creating a large gap. There's a large wait period until the end of the race where you can see everybody accordion back up and you get a big climax at the end. So again, at the end of the day, we have to consider viewers, though it's more fun for us because we're strategizing the whole time. We're saving tires, we're saving fuel. But if I'm watching one of these races, I feel like it would be extremely boring if I'm spending 20-30 minutes to see what the climax of this would be.
Yeah.
So that's how that's not how you gain viewers. As a competitor, I do want longer races, but as a viewer and a fan of the series, I think we're at the sweet spot. We're about 35 to 40-minute races, and I think we're pretty much there. In terms of what the format is, with two longer races with driver swaps instead of the three individual races in a final race, I think it's hard to say which one I prefer. I think this second format, what we ran at Salzburg, is good because it makes you feel more part of a team, right? Team Ford or Team Aston or Team Porsche. Whereas the other one, you're still an individual until the last race. So the strategizing becomes a larger part of the game versus you're still an individual until the last final moment.
More emphasis on the collaboration.
Exactly.
Now I have something, kind of a question for both of you, in terms of qualifying. The current qualifying format is you get 20 minutes, 1 driver, that essentially sets the fields. Then you get the top 6. If your driver has, set a top 6 time, they then go into the 6 lap or the, top 6 shootout. But it's 1 person qualifying. What would your guys' thoughts be on switching things up, making it more of a team qualifying and letting each individual do a qualifying lap, say they get 3 laps to set the fastest lap, combining and averaging those laps across the team so that it's an overall team qualifying, so that the team is more involved and you get an overall pace of the team to qualify.
I think that's a good idea. However, I think we should temper our conclusions based upon whether or not this sort of format has ever been used successfully in real life. Are you familiar with any of those kind of situations?
I can't name it off the top of my head, but I know it has been done.
Okay.
It's something that I think is quite fair, and it's actually kind of neat to see everyone play a part in that and see, kind of the strength of the team. Especially, we are doing a team championship, and we're working together as a team. And I think showing the strength of each team as a team for qualifying is quite fair. It also, I think, kind of gets us away from maybe a car that has a better BOP at a certain track, or a driver that's significantly quicker. It kind of brings everyone together as an overall pace, an overall team, to kind of set the grid for the race.
But do you think that would conclude the overall, the standings? Because you really want your faster guy to go in there and put down your fastest qualifying lap, right? And again, using strategy, you can maybe take advantage of having a slower guy and a faster guy running at a different part of the race with different tires. Do you think having an average qualifying lap, would that starting point basically, put you in a position where you're not passing or being passed by other cars on track? I think it would just kind of jump to the finish of the race.
I don't believe that, because you're not stuck with what driver you choose to start the race.
Wow.
So you might have a driver who is starting first, who could be the slower driver. Maybe they're a second or two off the pace, and the driver in 12th might be the fastest driver out of everybody. So I think it might almost mix the field as well.
Yeah.
Instead of, maybe just one car or one team that might be, incredibly quick. And it might actually mix the field up a little bit, and you might have to strategize, due to what other drivers are getting in the car, and if you can get around them, or if it's worth staying in the back and putting in your faster driver. In the end, I think it might mix the field up a little bit. It might just add a little bit extra.
I think it's an interesting idea, and if anyone's listening, it'd be cool to have a statistical model put together so that we could run sort of theoretical calculations and get, like as you suggest, what if the fastest driver of everybody has a couple of maybe off the pace teammates and is starting low down in the field, but then produces a very exciting first stint, because we of course want to have a good show put on. We don't want to diminish from the entire show. It's a good hypothetical and certainly worth exploring. That's a very interesting topic. So manufacturer, we had a wet race and we had a dry race, and the wet race was a point of contention in terms of BOP, balance of performance between all the vehicles, because the front engine and rear wheel drive cars, with the one notable exception of Mercedes, all had quite a difficult time putting down the power, whereas the mid-engine vehicles had quite an advantage, particularly out of slow corner acceleration. Now, no changes were made after some protests were brought upon the race organizers during the driver briefing. Basically, it was just, this is the way it is. It's a wet race. This is not something that we could have. We didn't want to necessarily manipulate. I'm paraphrasing here. And in the end result, we had Audi and we had Porsche fighting for the lead at the end, but Mercedes were right behind. In your gentlemen's opinions, do you think that it was fair for the BOP to be as it was for the wet race, or should it have been looked at a second time prior to this event? Armen.
I think it was fair. There's nothing unfair about it. I think it's a matter of you're given a certain situation, just like in real life. There's some cars that are going to be quicker in some races, and some cars are not. I think the question of BOP should not change based on a wet race. I think it's a question of physics, and that should be taken into consideration. My honest opinion is that PD rushed a wet race in promotion of the new content that they're releasing. They rushed it, and they didn't take into consideration that part of this will be, the real competitive aspect of cars. right? Some of the cars are not going to be as fast as other cars based on the physics, not so much the BOP.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be something we should be taken into review, but I'm still okay with the BOP. I'm not really.
For clarification, would you say that you're talking more about like this discrepancy of car performance is highlighting more so an issue with tire and physics models that should be the review of which should be of greater emphasis going forward?
100%.
Okay. Nick, your opinion?
I'm speaking from someone who was part of the bottom six, or the best of the rest, as I'm going to call it. Thankfully, we were best of the rest in our race and finished sixth. For us in the Aston Martin, it was incredibly difficult. I think we have, three great drivers, which I think we proved in our race. Our qualifying pace was, not quite top six material. We did everything in our power to, get up there, and we still missed it by, 3-4 tenths. But even our optimums weren't as quick as other people, and a lot of people struggled. BMW, for example, had Koke Lopez and Nico Rubelar. Those guys don't finish 10th, 11th, 12th place. It doesn't happen. And that's not to say anything about other drivers' capabilities, but we're talking about guys who have won and or finished on the podium in World Tours and been in contention to win Nations Cups and everything. So, when the top guys are struggling to finish in the top 10, I think there's a bit of a gap there. BOP is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect track to track, overall, in the wet, in the dry, in the snow. I don't care what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if we're going to run strictly wet or strictly dry, I almost think having some sort of separate BOP per track condition, at least within the game, this can't happen in real life. I think there almost needs to be BOP that evens that out. Mm-hmm. We in the Aston were consistently a second to a second and a half off the pace. Mm-hmm. We had a 9-lap race, I think.
Yeah.
And Team Aston, for us, we ran consistently 46.5s practically the entire race between all of our drivers, and we still finished 18 seconds behind. Mm-hmm. So we're not even in contention, and I think that affects the points. It affects the starting grid, for the next race. Mm-hmm. And if your car is good in the wet and then it's also good in the dry, you kind of have a huge advantage overall. Mm-hmm. And then that's where I kind of struggle with the BOP side of things and conditions with the wet, at least.
Just a small correction. I think it's a 17-lap race.
Oh, 17-lap race. Sorry, I don't know what I was
thinking. No worries. Yeah. Armen, you were going to say.
So, in terms of BOP, what do you think that they could have done to change and give your car an advantage? BOP-wise. Balance of
BOP-wise.
Weight and horsepower.
If we're considering both races with BOP?
Yeah. But
no, just the
same BOP.
Just
the wet.
Because there's such a discrepancy between the front engine and the mid-engine cars.
I think for this particular situation, especially a World Tour, where there's so much that counts. Literally, the first race counts for 25-30% of your score, we'll call it. Mm-hmm. And then the final race counts for, the rest. And I think the problem is if you have a bad race in the first one, you're very far behind to produce good results for the second race. And it means so much more. Before we had 4 races, to build points and get a good results. And, I think that having 4 races allows all the different cars to kind of have the chances to win a race, lose a race, finish in the middle, wherever it might be. And so I think it evens the playing fields, whereas now you have basically 2 options or, 2 opportunities to get something done. If you have one really bad one, you're really behind the 8 ball, coming into that second race. So I think BOP wise, they should do, at least for the World Tours, a wet BOP and a dry BOP, especially if we're going to bring these conditions into it, or at least a track specific. If have someone test these combinations, see what the discrepancy is, maybe reach out to some top players, have them test cars, report lap times back, etc. And really try and even out the field, because at the end of the day, I know Tristan, I know Armen is going to want to, we all want to race each other. We have a great time racing each other. The fans and the viewers love watching it. I think produces a good show overall. And if we're having such a discrepancy, I think it kind of takes away from that. And I think just going into it, a lot of us tested, and I think a lot of people were discouraged just going into this event already knowing that they were so far behind that they almost didn't want to try. So I think it was kind of discouraging, and I hope to see some positive changes with that. But we'll kind of have to see what happens. I know there was a lot of discussion from PD, from viewers, from competitors about some solutions, issues, etc.
So we have a new partner with Michelin, and if we think back to Gran Turismo 6, Yokohama was a partner brought on at that time to help improve force feedback and the tire model. And as a result, we started to feel like tire chatter when we would demand too much of the front tires. It would go beyond its really optimum slip angle, and we could feel it as a player and sort of get a better idea of where is the grip. Now with Michelin are a company that are honestly at the top of the heap when it comes to tire technology, tire knowledge, knowing the way that a tire reacts to all conditions. And I feel that the BOP suggestions that you guys have, where it's like track specific, is an excellent suggestion. I wonder if Michelin might be able to sidestep that solution by improving the tire and physics models of the cars so as to deliver kind of a more even balance of performance, because we know that front engine cars and mid-engine cars are going to have different attributes in terms of who's braking the best, who has the best acceleration, who has the best cornering, slow speed, high speed. It's all going to be dependent on different factors of weight distribution, things like this. And Michelin, I feel, are going to offer a huge trove of data to Gran Turismo to try and translate sort of more realistic conditions. So it's possible that maybe these concerns that we've raised might be solved with that. However, if they don't get solved, and perhaps if that takes quite a time to get solved, say before next year, which will still be GT Sport on the PlayStation 4 prior to the PlayStation 5 coming out, the balance of performance changes you guys suggest is probably the best fix. So my question to you is this, and I think it's probably to Nick, because you've been in the GT3 and the WC and the Blank Paint series. Is track-specific BOP a thing in real life?
Yes, actually, at least for Blancpain, I can't speak. Actually, I think IMSA does the same thing. They essentially rate tracks on a lettering system. And so you actually have track A, B, C, so they're a type. And so you have a track like Spa, which might be an A. Don't quote me; it could be a C. I don't really know what the letters actually are for each track. But you have an A, which is something like Spa, very quick, very fast. You're looking at top speed cars. Something like the Aston Martin or the GTR, for example. And then you go to something that's a B-rated track. Something off the top of my head, you might say it's like a Dragon Trail within the game, where it's like you've got some high-speed stuff, but you've also got some slow-speed stuff where you need some handling. And then you get something that's a C track, we'll call it Tsukuba, something that no car can really ever use its top speed, so it becomes kind of a pure handling track. And so they have these BOP-specific, settings that allow each car to be fairly even within these different track types. You have something like, I remember the Z4, for example, was a great, fantastic, quick car, but at Spa, it was off the pace because it didn't have that top speed. I remember being able to drive around them like they were standing still in the GTR, but then they'd catch us in the corners because they were so fast. So you can let a car have its strengths and weaknesses, but still allow it to produce the same lap times. And I think they did a really good job with that. And I think that's something that, would be really beneficial, honestly, for Gran Turismo to take into effect. They have the FIA as a partner, and I think that's something that they could leverage, to kind of bring to the game, and allow, a little more of an even playing field track to track.
Okay. Armen, I have a question for you with regards to vehicle selection. So, with Ford and also Outlaw Quadrant with Peugeot, we're able to qualify for this live event using vehicles that were not used in the live event. With the Peugeot, he had the VGT, but in the live event, he had to use the
RCZ.
The RCZ, thank you. A completely different animal. Still mid-engined, rear-wheel drive, but it's entirely different with its handling dynamic, its power delivery, and with Ford, you had been using the Mustang to great effect, I should note. But in the live event, instead, you had the Ford GT, a car that is frankly over 15 years old in this technology, with an enormous BOP power reduction.
Right.
I am curious to find out from you how you felt the car was in its competitiveness, if you think it was fair for that to be an obligation placed upon you, or if that should be something that should be changed.
Well, I still have to get a real clear answer as to why they don't allow us to use our specific cars in live events. But as far as the Ford GT, I think there's some tracks that it's actually faster than the Mustang, and there's some tracks that the Mustang is faster than the Ford GT. Mm-hmm. So there's advantages and disadvantages. In this scenario, I think we definitely had advantages with the Ford GT. Now, though we had advantages, I was still not as good with the Ford GT as I would have been in the Mustang. So considering the fact that I've spent maybe 300-400 hours in the Ford Mustang GR3 car, it's hard to it's hard to be up to speed as or at least as quick as if I would be in a Ford Mustang if I'm driving a Ford GT. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely something you have to take into account. You also have we also had just like the Aston, a new BOP for this specific race. So even doing online races with our power to weight ratio and our power to whatever the balance of performance setup, it's still not going to replicate the exact BOP that we're going to have in the live event. So it was definitely a challenge. It's something I have to overcome and something I have to train for. But it always it throws you off. It definitely does throw you off.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. Well, moving on to nations. So Friday concluded with some good battles and a lot of respect shown on track. The Nations Championship for Saturday was a big question mark going in because we're all familiar with the results from New York City. It was a great event up until the last few laps between Igor and Cody.
I think it was still a great event.
Yeah, still a great event. Because even bad publicity is still publicity.
Right.
Still good publicity. But sour tastes being what they are, if they're particularly potent, then it can leave a bad feeling about an event. And fortunately, for our event, we didn't have any kind of startling controversy. We had Mick Hazal finally getting his Nations Championship win after having been denied it for so many events. I'm particularly curious as to your opinions with regards to car and track combinations. There's been discussion online of the people who are watching on YouTube and such, and Gran Turismo TV, that these might have been not the most exciting choices. Starting with first the Group 1 race, the Slot A race with the Bugatti VGT at Catalunya. Certainly a fast combination, and an exciting, certainly first lap, first few corners, with Hazal defending his lead around the outside of turn 3 like he was Fernando Alonso. That was very impressive. But as the race wore on, we saw very few battles for position, really only brought upon by penalties. For example, Carrazza getting the 1 second penalty, the fair penalty that brought his competitor back towards him to retake the position. But that was kind of it. Do you think that that combination, how would you might have suggested that combination could have been different for a little more excitement?
Well, I mean, to dive into it, well, I don't want to dive into this right now, but I think it was a great combo in terms of the car and track, but I think a lot of us have been suffering with other factors, and I think that's what's affecting the race. And when I mean other factors, I'm talking about the slipstream. It's been incredibly hard for many of us to follow closely, especially in the high downforce cars. When you're talking the X 2019, any of the LMP1 cars, GR1, GR2, even GR3, I think a lot of people are struggling to be racy behind someone. And it's almost better to sit back a second or two, but you constantly have to kind of dive in and out of the draft. And I think that's what affected the racing. And I think had that been a little different, I think the combos would have been fine.
Do you guys feel that perhaps something closer to spec racing might have been more appropriate for the Nations Championship?
No, I think the fact that we're racing the fastest cars at the pinnacle of Gran Turismo, right? So we're the World Tours consists of some of the best players in the world. So I think we should be racing the fastest cars in the world, right? The only thing I question is, again, comes down to like what the dirty air should be, right? I do want to see people racing the Red Bull cars. I want to see people in GR1, GR2 cars. But is the dirty air really represented accurately in the game? And that's something I want to actually ask Nick, because he does have the most amount of race experience here. Do you think dirty air extends back to 1.5 seconds, and does it affect as much the front aero of the following car as it does in the game?
Absolutely not. Speaking from an example here, you can even search this on my YouTube somewhere. I remember running Blancpain in the GTR at Monza. Specifically, especially Monza is a good example since it was used in the race this weekend. Catching an Audi R8, and it wasn't until and that we're doing 140, 50 miles an hour, in this car, where you actually start catching someone, where you kind of notice that increase in speed and that draft that you're coming up behind them. A second max at that speed. But that gap is variable depending on speed, which is not something that's happening in the game. We went from half a second, which I think is actually quite realistic, honestly. And then overall, if you want to average it out, speed-wise on how far that gap extends, where you can catch that slipstream. But I think right now the air it's so dirty and almost non-existent in these downforce cars that they almost become impossible to drive. And sometimes it's you are catching someone down the straight, you're doing 5-6 miles an hour faster than you normally are, you brake 50 meters early, and it should be fine, and something this would be fine in real life. You start catching them, and the closer you get, it's almost as if you keep catching them even faster the closer you get, but you catch them at such a speed that you can't slow the car or swerve or anything, and it's almost like it exponentially gets quicker as you get closer to the car, and that's not something that happens in real life. It's the dirty air almost just completely removes all aero from the car. So I think if we can somehow lessen the amount of dirty air, I think we need to bring the slipstream gap down to more about half a second, because I think that's about the most realistic, especially if we're going to keep it kind of a static setting instead of a dynamic setting, since I know that's something that is possible, but incredibly difficult and time consuming probably to build. So a quick solution, absolutely we should close that gap back to what it used to be, maybe lessen the amount of dirty air, and maybe we'll get those close races again, and people will be able to fight and enjoy the combos. Armen?
Do you think, well, this is going back to, you said GT3 cars, right? Yeah. So do you think it'll be the same? Of course it's not going to be the same in street cars, right? And it's not going to be the same if you're racing the Red Bull cars and GR1 cars, Group 1 cars like LMP1. So the dynamic aspect of this is incredibly hard to program, I think. And I think it should change based on speed, right? But also, we're not considering the fact that it can affect the front end aero of the car, but also the rear end aero of the car, right? So there's so much programming that is required to go into this. What do you think the solution of this would be?
If I may offer only not so much a real life experience, but other sim racing prior to Gran Turismo, GTR2, iRacing, R Factor. R Factor particularly, although an old game, did have a very good aerodynamic model, and as you just mentioned, how when in real life you're getting close to a car as a competitor, that the front car is actually getting rear downforce taken off of it because of the proximity, like when you're feet behind, that is disrupting the airflow, the vortices off of the diffuser, the rear wing, and you're pushing pressure back onto the rear of their car, applying lift to the rear ends. That's something that is missing from Gran Turismo.
Yeah, I kind of absolutely agree, and kind of for like a real life example, again, like I remember driving at Spa, and chasing cars down and going through Eau Rouge, and Eau Rouge and Raidillon. I remember that if I was within 2 or 3 car lengths behind someone, Eau Rouge became extremely difficult to follow at that speed. And so I realized, if I was somewhere past about 3-4 cars is where it starts getting questionable, I would actually sit back going down the straight, pull off a little bit, and make sure I got a good run up Eau Rouge and make sure, I had that traction, I had that grip, because I would then have that aero. But, we're talking about only pushing yourself back, say, 6-7 car lengths, and then catching that draft as you go up Eau Rouge and Radion and chasing them down the straight. Whereas now Gran Turismo, we're looking at something that is, if you're 10 car lengths back, 12, even more sometimes, you're catching that and the car loses all grip. And so that's been incredibly difficult to fight, especially when we've become so used to the way it was before, which I think was, quite good. It's not great, it's not perfect, but I think it was quite good. But it's so severe now that, it's incredibly hard to get used to, because it's not something that is real, almost.
Briefly, this comes to mind, another element that is missing from Gran Turismo, and that's crosswinds. We have environment that is now starting to be accurately modeled with the reintroduction of rain, and it seems that with at least the next gaming system in Gran Turismo 7, whenever it does come out, will most likely have transitions between time as well as weather. And wind has been modeled in many PC racing simulators, more kind of industry standard simulators, as an adjustable variable, something that will give you a tailwind at times and a headwind at times and a crosswind at times, and that itself also affects just where is the draft. The draft is moving around, it's whipping like a big tail. So having that added realism when it can be made available by the hardware that the game is played upon will certainly only improve things. So, not sure where to take it at this point, but I can say that, and I hope you guys agree, that we certainly had a very nice World Tour event. We had a great party afterward, we had wonderful catering, we had an exceptional DJ, we had certainly an energetic Kaz, who I saw dancing for the first time, and that guy is quite the machine. He buoys the energy of everyone around him, and that is a cool thing to see. He was particularly, I think, happy with this event. And man, Hangar 7 is a special place to be. I think it was very smart that compared to last year, the event was held in the evening rather than in the middle of the day. So Hangar 7 is a huge glass building. If you haven't been there or seen it before, and it can be quite the sauna if it's held in the middle of the day or just chilling out and the sun's just beating down directly upon it. So the temperature was nice, the company was nice, the production was amazing. I'm wondering if either of you have any just additional thoughts, comments you have about the event in general, or any of the races.
I don't know. I think it was a really good event. I think it was a little more mellow, but I think we all kind of enjoyed it more. It's been great getting to know everyone this year and kind of seeing new faces, and it's we've all kind of become a family, which has been really fun. But I think each event is getting better and better. It's still in its infancy, so I think the more we keep playing and showing kind of like what we like, what we don't like, and kind of working with everyone as part of the event staff, I think we'll just continue to grow this and make it better, and really we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I've had a lot of fun. I think the racing's been good. I'm excited for Tokyo. I'm excited for Monaco, for everyone who's made it there. I think we're set up for our next two events are going to be fantastic. So yeah, I can't wait to see the racing.
Same with me. Armen.
No, I agree 100% with what Nick said. I think it was tremendously fun to be a part of it. Also, I thought it was a little bit slower paced than other events that we've been to. So we had a little bit of more free time to go enjoy the place, the tourism aspect of it. And also, it was nice to see Polyphony Digital actually give us a little bit of time to actually speak our thoughts and maybe give us a bit of a forum to actually exchange ideas on how we can improve the game. And I think it's good to hear them listening and paying attention to us. And it's also really nice to see that we're part of this evolving organism that we can call Gran Turismo is trying to be perfect, right? The pinnacle of sim racing. So it's really nice to be a big part of this, and I think it was a tremendous event. Mind you, it's my third event, so if I'm comparing to anything else, I think this is
totally.
Yeah, this is good.
I echo your thoughts. I think it's so cool how we buy the product as the consumer, the gamer, to reward the work that they put into it. And now they, by opening that conversation that you cite as to, hey, how can we improve this game, to us, the dedicated gamers, is rewarding our investment in time, because this is not something that is particularly profitable to all of us. We have to make sacrifices in our work, in our home life, to attend these events as wonderful as they are, and they are absolutely wonderful, with just the special places we get to go, people we get to meet, the friends we get to make, and the races we get to experience. Nevertheless, there's always a better balance out there, and it seems Polyphony are really truly seeking to find a better balance. So the future is bright, and I think that is a great conclusion that we can end this upon. And I am certainly like really excited for Tokyo. It's only 6 weeks away,
Right.
and then we have Monaco 1 month after. So you boys better be ready, because Porsche are going to bring it.
Aston needs our win. So we're going to be there. But I can say I would like to see Armen and Team Ford on the podium.
Yep.
So I wish you luck, but it's not going to be easy.
No,
Because I'm not going to let it be.
It won't be. We just want our BOP back. We want our 1% horsepower back.
Yeah, me too. I know. We both got bumped.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good fun. It's tremendous, and we're looking forward to Tokyo.
Totally. We know that the World Tours tend to bring new tracks, new conditions. So there's going to be a great amount of chance, and certainly some luck to be had to those who are willing to reach for it. And on that note, I'd like to wish you both the best of luck in the next World Tour event. I want to thank everyone for listening. And this has been another episode of Gran Turisbros with Armen, TRC Stagger, with Nick, GumballCGT, and myself, Tristan, Roadbeef. We'll catch you at the next one, and thanks again. Take care.